Welcome to our show, Animation Industry Trends. I'm Maureen, one of the co-founders of this show. This show, which is Animation Masterclass with story artists, is hosted by the Animation Industry Club. For those of you on YouTube, please subscribe to us to access our weekly shows live at Baobab Studios. On Discord, tune in every week at Wednesday, actually every other week now, at Wednesday, 12:30 PST in the Lightbox Expo Discord. Though right now you all should be paying attention to everything going on at Lightbox. And on Clubhouse, follow our club to access more of our talks. And be sure to follow us on Twitter and Instagram to learn about the upcoming talks. Today we're talking to some of the animation industry's greatest talents in story and story art, many of them also directing now. And I'm going to hand it off after I introduce the two moderators. First is Anika Nagpal. She's a creative development supervisor at Baobab, where she manages the earliest stages of story and art development on a number of animated series and feature projects on their slate. Previously, she was the production manager on Namu, which means tree in Korean, which is an animated short film directed by Academy Award nominee Eric Oh. Welcome, Anika.
Hello.
And welcome, Todd Webb. Todd Webb is a storyboard artist and character designer currently studying visual media and animation at Nevada State College. He has a passion for storytelling and animation, especially in the action-adventure genre. Just so everyone knows, I already have people raising their hands right now. But if you have questions, chat with us on YouTube Live or on Discord, tweet at us, or use the back channel feature on Clubhouse. Now I'm going to hand it over to Anika and Todd to introduce our guests.
Amazing. Well, I'm so excited about the panel we have today. I'll kick it off with Jony. Jony is a story veteran from Blue Sky, where he worked as a director in development, head of story on Nimona, Ice Age 5, and a story artist on Rio 2, 3 Ice Age movies, amongst many others. And then we have Maggie Kang, who's currently at Sony. Previously, she worked as the head of story on the Lego Ninjago movie and as a story artist on films like Croods, Kung Fu Panda 3, Rise of the Guardians. She is currently directing the very anticipated K-pop Demon Hunters movie that's currently in production at Sony. And then we have Tony. He is a story artist currently at Pixar, previously at Blue Sky, who's worked on films that we all know and love like Coco, The Good Dinosaur, Toy Story 4, and Rio. And then we've got Ariel, who is a story artist currently at Disney TV and Netflix. Their works include Star vs. the Forces of Evil, Amphibia, and Big City Greens. And then we have Jed, who's here. Welcome, Jed. We got you on.
I'm here.
Jed is a lead story artist at Pixar, who previously worked as a story artist on features at all of the big studios, including PDI, DreamWorks, Disney, and Illumination, on movies like The Secret Life of Pets, Big Hero 6, and Madagascar. Welcome to all of our panelists.
Thank you. Thanks. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so I will kick it off with my favorite question. So storyboarding is so many different things. It's drawing, it's animating, it's cinematography, it's writing, it's editing. So I'm curious, why did all of you guys pick storyboarding? And if you weren't in story, what do you think you'd be doing instead?
Who should go first? I mean...
Yeah. You should go first, Maggie.
Me?
Yeah.
Thanks, Jony. Well, I got into the business because I just loved story. So naturally, storyboarding was kind of the route that I picked because I also really enjoyed drawing. I can't say that I really enjoy drawing currently. Becoming a director, I actually thought, all right, I probably don't have to draw anymore, but it's really not true. I have to draw more. So I think if I didn't get into storyboarding, I think for me, I think storyboarding, the most important skill to have as a story artist is writing. That's every decision you make when you're creating a storyboard has to center around writing, and your characters and your story. And if it doesn't, then I don't really see a point in that. So I think if I wasn't in storyboarding or started in storyboarding, then I would have jumped into writing.
Cool.
Yeah. Who's next? Jed. I'm gonna put
Jed. Go next, Jed.
Yeah.
Okay. I guess I'm still kind of stuck in the middle. I think I got into it. I was really into both games and film at the same time, and I really thought games were really interesting as a medium, but it felt like there was so much more to explore. And to do that, I thought, I should study the best linear storytelling first, and that I thought was film. So that got me more interested in story and doing that. And it just clicked more than I expected it to, and now I'm still here.
You try to get out so many times, but
You can't get out.
I'll go next. I always love animation and game, just like Jed, and I do like drawing. So I didn't really know what I was gonna do in school. I was taking all these random classes, animation and illustration and fine art. And one day Jed's like, you should take this class from Rob Gibbs from Pixar. Then I took the class, and that's first exposure for me to story and what storyboarding is all about. I actually quite enjoyed it. I thought it was fun to draw stories and entertain people, and fell in love with it and been doing it ever since.
Yeah, when I started, I didn't actually want to be a story artist. I had no idea what it was. I just wanted to work in animation. I started learning animation and illustration at the Academy of Art. Jony and Jed and I all went there, and it was just from collaborating with other people and working on shorts and stuff like that. My mentor kind of took me under his wing, and we worked on a bunch of shorts together. And just by doing that, I worked on so many different aspects of animation that story was the one thing that I really was pulled to. But it was funny because I just went to school because I love to draw, and I love the collaborative process of animation. So doing that, also 3D was coming out, so there was less 2D drawing animation happening. So I still got to draw the story, and I actually loved it even more. So that's where that went.
And I guess that leaves me. Let's see. I've always been drawing. I've been doodling like little comics and stuff of my notebooks, like ever since like SpongeBob came out, that sort of thing. And I always knew I wanted to do something with drawing. And I didn't really know much about storyboarding either. And so I was trying to go to school for something art related. But I kind of found out, not through school, but like through all these different online forums and stuff, like what the process was actually like when people started blogging for the first time about this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And so I originally wanted to be an animator, but I found out that I really liked telling stories a bit more than like the technical process, even though, of course, animating is great. Like, character acting is so much fun. But I found that I just loved drawing story beats and writing. So, I don't know, maybe in another life I would have been more into comics, or like maybe I would have stuck it out and been an animator, or maybe I would have done like some weird third thing. I don't know.
Amazing. All right, well, I'm excited to kind of dig into process a little bit with you guys. So tell me a little bit about, when you're working on a TV show or a feature film, you're typically assigned a sequence, right? But then there's like overall film and TV show things like character continuity and overall tone. And so tell me a little bit about how you balance thinking about that bigger picture while boarding a moment or a sequence.
Well, I think people are going to need to start like raising hands or like just picking people or something. I I used to think about that a lot. I started as a revisionist, and so I did a lot of focusing on keeping things on model, keeping the tone correct and stuff. But you know what? As I've gotten further and further along, I found out that people trust me to do my own thing a little bit more. I don't know. Maybe it's just because I've been on a production long enough, or people trust me enough with how I draw, or they know that I can write these things. Sometimes I just kind of do my own thing, and it keeps surprising me the things that are allowed that I can do every day, because sometimes I do really weird stuff. But I guess maybe that's what people maybe like about me personally. Maybe I've just been singled out as kind of the weird guy, and so they just let me do it.
I think everybody, I think people get there, I think that comes with experience of having worked with, a bunch of different people in leadership. It's really about, I actually haven't had, I'm going to say maybe 2 months of experience in TV, but from my feature experience, it's, every director and every movie that you're going to work on is different. And you start to dip your toes into taking risks. Some people are for me, I was very hesitant to do that in my early career. But the more I did it, the more I felt comfortable. And that's how I think you're talking about building a trust with your creative leadership, so that they're oh yeah, we like the stuff that you've tried. And then you're oh great. And then you try a little bit more, and they give you, they respond to it. And so you do more and more. And I think that's how you develop your you get more brave, with what you're going to do next. But it's definitely I don't know. For me, it was really hard to do it at first.
Oh God, it's so hard in TV.
I mean, it's terrifying, right? But it's, because you always have to remember, your idea may not be suitable for the show or the person who's making the bigger picture thing. So it's a risk, but it's I always think that we're stand-up comedians. We always have to pitch stuff and sell things, and if people don't buy it, then it's oh crap, what do I do? But then you have to have that thick skin of brushing it off and then trying it again.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you don't fail, then you're not going to find out what's right. And building a relationship with whoever is, the director is you have a relationship with them. It's just building that relationship up and understanding what it is that they're looking for. However they're reading the script or writing the script, they have a specific language, and you have to communicate them with them through your drawings. And that relationship builds over time. As it goes on, you get more trust, and you can actually kind of throw those ideas out there.
Right. Yeah, I agree with that.
Getting used to the different, from studio to studio and show to show, every story. I mean, just what we do is also just so amorphous a lot of the time. It's constantly evolving. No one seems to ever truly know what we're for.
I know, what are we doing? I don't know.
So everyone uses us very differently, and I think that's like you were saying, Maggie. I think that's really important. Just figuring out how they want to use you and finding where you fit in that.
Yeah, and that's why we always call it casting when we put artists on certain scenes and sequences. There are some people that are good for certain moments, and other people that it's like casting actors, because that's also part of our job.
Right. For me, it's important step to sort of kind of take in what your assignments and kind of sit down and think through it, rather than just go ahead and board it. I would thumbnails and write notes to the note of developing relationship with the filmmakers and whoever is in charge of you. Then I would take maybe a couple of days just to process, and after that I would go either to my head of story or directly to the directors or director with my questions, so that I will have all the information that I needed to start boarding. And even then, sometimes you're still taking chances, like you all say. The hard part is to be willing to fail, and at least what is not working, and then hopefully you get closer to what they're looking for.
The question I always get from like junior artists is like, how do you maintain your your tastes and your integrity as an artist, and protect your viewpoints, but also like work on something that's not yours. And for me, I think it's always I think it's so much easier, especially in feature, because I don't think this happens as much in TV, is kind of accept that you're not making your own movie. You're providing a service to the director, but really ultimately the studio or wherever the money comes from, because they're the boss, and you are part of kind of just a group that's a team that's creating a bigger vision that's even bigger than your own. So, but we as artists, I always I've been handed scenes that I'm just I don't even know why we're doing this, but a lot of times you have to kind of execute it just to show people that it doesn't work. And it's hard to get through those scenes, but for me, I've always tried to find, and I always have managed to find something about, the scene, something, either it's a character or a moment or even a simple joke or a bit of acting that I latch onto, and I can just connect with it emotionally and I'm able to get through it. And so that's really our job, is to find those moments and be able to create that moment and execute that scene to the best of our ability.
Totally. The best parts are when somebody gets a sequence and I don't get, somebody else gets it, and I've read the script and I'm like, wow, that's going to be tough, and I have no idea how they're going to pull this off, and they totally change it in a way that it just makes it work, and I'm still blown away, and it's exciting because I don't know, it just tells you the power of what you can do with a script. And I don't know, those times when you're really frustrated and you see a script page that's not so great, I don't know, that is totally the job, is finding that stuff.
Yeah, sometimes even happens that you get recast, right? I don't know. I've experienced where I work on a scene where I get pulled off from the scene because the directors just couldn't find. I couldn't give them what they wanted, and they recasted somebody else, and that person boarded in a week, and it was amazing. You're like, whoa. Hopefully didn't see it that way. Well, that would come first. It's man, I'm terrible. But then it's a learning process. So you go oh, I never thought about it that way.
I'm offended and impressed.
Yeah,
that's the feeling.
It's the best feeling that you could ever get.
Yeah, I've definitely had an experience where it's hey, this scene, it's hey, would you mind taking over this scene? Can you just maybe put your spin on it? That happens all the time.
Right.
Especially later in the process, where it's just sometimes when you're in the beginning, it's you're too close to it to see what's not working, and usually you can tell because it's the hardest part to do, because it's my brain just refuses to accept what I'm drawing right now because something's off. Right. But then later on, someone said hey, just why don't we give this guy a pass at it? And they'll just see it from a completely different point of view. Maybe they're the action guy or the funny guy or the musical guy. Everyone's got their little flavor to it.
Yeah.
It's nice too. Actors you're saying before, they really understand that, and they appreciate. They give you the comfort knowing you're there to try stuff. It's not on you. They know a lot of stuff isn't in your control either. It's your job is to take those pages and make them the best you can, and it's like you said, it's part of a process. It's just seeing what you can do with it. Sometimes other things grow out of that exploration too that no one thought of, and oh, this is a completely different take from what we were thinking, but this evolves into a completely new approach, and really that a lot of times.
Yeah.
I was going to say, sometimes the theme still doesn't work, but there's part in there that was created that does end up going into another scene. So it's yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't think anything's wasted.
Right.
It's all, even if something's not working.
Exactly. Yeah.
Tony, you're saying, there's something in there that informs whether this doesn't work, or oh, that's an interesting little thing that we can use here. Maybe not here, but somewhere else.
Right.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So I'm really curious about that sort of iteration process that you guys are talking about. I work at Baobab with Eric Darnell, and something that he often says, which I think is really interesting, is that like you can never unsee a storyboard, right? But then at the same time, so much of storyboarding is trying out different ideas and then throwing them out and trying something new. And so how do you kind of like balance those two things at once?
My number one rule I would always give in any classes I did too was like, never draw more than you mind throwing away.
Yeah.
Like, it's all about getting the read up there, get the idea up, but then stop at that point. Like, don't render it, don't clean stuff. Like, just as long as it reads, like, and you can pitch it and it's enough to sell the idea, like, that's great, because that's kind of the whole point. It's like just getting. There's the whole rest of production to make it look good.
Yeah, it's
like,
not our job to make it look good.
Yeah,
they're CG movies. We can't do that.
Not always the case in TV.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
Yeah. Ariel's here to give us the other.
Oh God, sometimes I look at feature boards and I'm like, what the hell? Because it's like it's still so clear and stuff, but like, good God, like it can be like could be like 10 or 15 different board artist styles in there, but it's still the same movie. You still get what's going on. But for TV, like by the end of it, like you do have revisionists and stuff to help you, but especially more recently, there's just like this pressure. You have to make it like really clean, really on model, and you really have to make everything look great. Sometimes they make you do shading and things like that. Sometimes I put way too much of that on myself though, because it's like I just want this to look super, super cool. But then everyone's just like, this is gonna go, the timers are gonna delete like these extra poses, or we're gonna get a colorist to come in. It's like you didn't need to do all this stuff because that's their job. It's hard. It's like you want everything to look as epic as it does in your head, but ultimately that's not necessarily your job. And I don't know. It's hard, man. It's hard. And we only get like a couple of weeks to do it, too. That's the thing. Like every month there's a new whole episode you have to work on. And in feature, it's just like I've been working on this same shot for like 5 years because it keeps getting redone.
I think that's one of the things about staying loose if you can too, is like, because a lot of times when you get done with the scene, that's the first time you're seeing it too. And so, you know, as much as you want to pre-visualize in your head, you're really not seeing it till about an hour before you pitch, and then you're like, oh no, I would have done this totally differently.
Yeah, but a lot of time too, your first take on the scene, it's probably the closest thing that what you would do as a storyteller or story artist, because after that there will be iteration with the directors and whatnot. It will evolve eventually.
Yeah.
But that's the process, right? Like, you work together with other artists on the team and the directors to make it better.
Mm-hmm. All right, so I've got some specific questions for each of you now. So Jet, this one's for you. So given your experience working at so many different studios with so many different kinds of directors, this is something Maggie touched on as well. How does your job look different working with different kinds of directors?
Yeah, I mean, it can change from. It really comes down to how they view story. I think there's most directors I know have rotated in and out of story. Like, they either came from it and got into directing, and then that's what they do in between directing assignments too. And I feel like they tend to kind of be a lot more comfortable with us, like having us be involved in the creative process a lot more. There's the story. We're story artists, so it's half story, half drawing. So, but then there's another approach too, where it's like some directors feel very comfortable just working smaller group with the writer, and like they're very specific about the pages they're writing, and you're there to take those and then find what you can and plus those, and kind of like define their vision from the launch and make sure you're trying to sell that as well. It can be very broad, just depending who you're working for, and because each studio has its own culture, but then within that each show has its own culture too, and it's funny, like even some directors, like their style meshes better at one studio versus another, so that can affect it as well.
Mm-hmm.
Mm. All right, Jony, this one's for you. So you worked as the head of story. So tell me a little bit about what you feel like a perfect story team would look like. Like, what do you feel like are the pillars of a great story team?
For me, it's all about believing in the team, right? So a lot of time we story artists, well, at least in my experience in the past, try to stand out on their own. So when I ran my team, I try to develop a culture where we're in this together. So it does not matter who sequences this. In fact, I would purposely switch out people between sequences. So I force them to work together and collectively talking about the story together. And I would ask my directors just to kind of talk to my team and share their thoughts and their ideas. Then sort of kind of starting to help each other out. So it creates a comfortable environment where they can just kind of go to each other and say, hey, on your sequence, I have this idea. Do you want to talk about it? So maybe we can try this out and whatnot. Because ultimately, at the end, like I think Maggie was saying, on the screen is not your drawings. It's 3D, right? So there's no point. I mean, I understand like the portfolio side of things, which is one thing. But the ownership of the whole story is more important than an ownership of the sequence, individually.
All right, and then Maggie, this one is for you. Tell us a little bit about how you made the transition from story to directing, and how do you feel like your background in story is a superpower when it comes to directing?
I've kind of built every studio I went to and every job that I did. I've just tried to make create really good relationships with everybody I've worked with. And luckily, one of the producers I worked with, who is my current producer, Aaron Warner, so he produced all the Shrek films and stuff, and so I worked with him on Shrek 4. He, for some reason, just always had, we just had a good relationship and always wanted to work with me. And so, but this was over 10 years of building this relationship with this producer who is also my friend. And he went to Sony and he was looking for pitches, and I literally just pitched him, how about, over brunch, they're like a K-pop girl group, but they're also demon hunters. That was literally the pitch, and he was like, I love it, let's do this. And I kind of laughed at it, and then the next week he had a deal ready for me. So I was like, oh, okay, this is great. So it was just, if it sounds like it was kind of easy, and I guess it was, but it was just, building a reputation as an artist, as a storyteller for a lot of years. I think that's what really ultimately got me this role, and this opportunity. And the way that my background helps me is, I know so much about story now. I'm just confident whenever I go into a room to back up my ideas, and that's your job, literally. 95% of my job is, besides creating pitch decks, which I have to do every week, is always pitching this movie and always defending the ideas. And I'm actually really heavy into writing the draft with my directing partner. So it's not just storyboarding. It's I'm actually writing, and because I have a solid background and all these credits to support my experience in story, you just get that respect when you go into that room. So I just feel very prepared, for this role, and I'm not fumbling. And I think the experience just helps with that.
That's amazing.
I'll add that Maggie's superpower will also be the fact that she can draw, because after working,
I laugh.
Because honestly, that was huge, because I just worked, with a director that was a story artist as well. So and the fact that she could draw and communicate in that way to story artists as well as animation, drawovers, it's a huge help.
Yes, that's
That'd be-
definitely true. It's like, because
Agreed.
you can't really, like, the question we get with this movie, so Tony meant drawing just in general. I heard that as drawing well, which is not what I do, but but it's definitely helped me. Like, people always ask, like, what is the tone of this? And you're like, well, like, there's not a lot of comps that you can, comps meaning comparisons that people always ask for, and so people just don't get it. And I'm just like, okay, well, you can't really get that through reading a draft, so I'll just board it. And it's so easy, and they're like, oh, that's what it is. Like, it's enough, because ultimately it's something visual, audio visual, that we're going to experience. It's a movie, not something that we're going to read. So just to be able to, like, execute that is such, like, it's the superpower. Like, that's what they call it. And it's really, like, it's really the best thing.
I think that's one of the truest moments of the saying, a picture says 1,000 words becomes incredibly true when you're trying to give and take notes with boards.
Yeah. I mean, the interpretation of script pages could, between different people, right?
Yeah,
totally.
Could mean different things. Somebody see it one way and the other person see it another way, and even down to, like, how you read the dialogue, So once you have the reel up or the sequence up, and then you have something visual that you can note on or talk about and then develop, rather than just a bunch of words.
Yeah. And then I talk about writing a lot, and for me, like, writing isn't about just typing in words on your keyboard. It's really visual. It's that, but also visual writing. It's how do you visually connect these ideas so that it makes sense, like, on the screen, and you're able to tell us a visual story through shots and through camera, a moment. Like, that's what writing is, and that is what our job is.
And as a story artist, you also have that, you're thinking about that too, which, you're not just thinking about words or dialogue. Obviously it's all part of it, but you're already thinking about a visual image in your head. And when you're writing, I'm sure it's coming together.
Awesome. All right, Ariel, this one is for you. So everything I've heard about storyboarding in the TV space is that it's very fast, and you have to do a lot very quickly. And so I'm curious, when you're stuck on a scene or a sequence, what helps you get unstuck?
Oh God. Sometimes you just, gosh, if there's a scene that I'm really stuck on, or I really don't like or necessarily want to do, first of all, I ruminate on it, I let it sit for a day or two if I can help it. It's very odd. For me, I know there's a part of your career where you have to, like, turn off that part in your brain where you get, like, really emotionally involved, because sometimes, like, a job is a job and you just need to do what you need to do. But for me, I'm very emotional about my work. If I can't get to like it, then it's really hard for me to put it down. And so a lot of times I do have to do a lot of thumbnailing, or I'm a night owl as well. So sometimes, like, I'll just wake up in the middle of the night, like, by God, that's it. That sort of thing. Like, it's unfortunately, it's an art, not a science for me, especially because you have to do it so quickly. But to be honest, sometimes that fast pace is kind of what helps save the board for me. Because there's at a point where it's like you're close to the deadline, like your brain is shutting down, you're like in crunch mode, and the thing that you just couldn't do, it's like, well, your brain's just like, you gotta do it. It's like, the deadline's here. And it's not necessarily the most healthy way of getting things done, but sometimes that just kind of unlocks in your brain. It's like, okay, I can at least, at the very least, do this simple pass on something. Or maybe if you're not, like, on a script written show, sometimes they'll let you, like, maybe trim down the script a little bit, maybe make some shortcuts, or, like, cut out the stuff that isn't working and maybe come up with a new solution. It really depends on what show that you're on. I'm trying to think of other things to say, but I think that those sort of problems come up less and less, and it really does come from that trust you build up with either your showrunners or director. Like, sometimes you can have a powwow meeting with them and say, hey, I really don't think that this works. Mm-hmm. Or, I really don't see, like, why this is necessary. Maybe there's a different idea. It's like, I think it would be, like, either more epic or more emotionally satisfying if we did something like this, for instance. And usually your instincts are right, you know? Like, if there's something like, this feels like, I don't know why, I just can't put to paper what's, like, either in the script or the outline. And usually that's the stuff that gets cut. Like, usually, if, like, you can sense it, then the audience will.
Yeah. Right. All right, so a related question from Kenny, an audience question from YouTube. What is the toughest story problem that you've ever solved, and how did you go about solving it? Tell us some stories.
Oh, boy. Well, every story is always the hardest story. Like, when you're at the end of it, it's just like, you know what, that was great, but then the next one, you're like, oh. To be honest, like, my very first board assignment ever, I started on a mid-season finale with all of these new characters and a song sequence to boot, and a fight scene as well. So I kind of was frisbeed into the fire, as it were, and I don't know, sometimes, like, if you're new, like, sometimes you have to ask directors, like, is this okay? Is this okay? Or sometimes it's just, there's just sort of clarity, you know? It's like, after maybe you, like, watch some references, like, I want the tone of, like, this scene. Maybe you put on, like, some anime or something to, like, inspire you. That so happens. It's like they're fighting choreography. Save me. But
I did that on Ice Age once. Like, I was for 3 months, I think, maybe 3 months. It was a tough sequence. Like, Carlos, our director at the time, was like, I've seen it before, and I want to see something different. So I was watching Naruto at the time, and
it's like, I can't believe it looks kind of like a shot-for-shot comparison of Fooly Cooly. I mean,
yeah, I was like, you know what? I'm gonna try that, and I tried it. And not that I copied, but I tried, like, I imitate the energy.
You're inspired.
Like, I'm looking at reference, and like, if you're starting out, especially, sometimes you do need to copy, and that's not a bad thing. Like, you can't, like, steal, obviously. No. But, like, I remember when I was, before I was working, like, as I said, like, a lot of forums were finally starting to post, like, work from shows because the internet was starting to become more popular. I had a huge, embarrassingly large collection of Invader Zim storyboards and concept art because I loved those forums, and it was like people trying to learn about animation or maybe make their own shorts and things like that. And then, like, things like Adventure Time, they used to be so great about uploading storyboards and stuff too, and I would just save a bunch of them. It's like, this is just so interesting. And I think that's where I didn't necessarily learn about those sort of things in school. I kind of just learned it through osmosis, like through blog stuff or just like other artists that I knew that were practicing the same sort of thing. Back for like story though, it's kind of like I said, sometimes there's a problem that is just like, you just know that there's no way that you can handle this, and sometimes you can ask others for help. Sometimes you just have to convince people that your way might be a bit better, and sometimes that does work. A lot of the times that does work. You can meet a sort of compromise with people if you're inspired enough. That doesn't always work, though, because animation is, of course, so collaborative, and you can't always be so personal, and you can't always, every time a storyboard comes out, it might feel like your baby, but it's not, because it's going to be touched by so many people. You're going to see the final animated thing, and it's like, what the hell? It's like, that joke I liked wasn't even in it. And you just have to, you gotta let it go, because it's like, you can't credit one person for anything in animation. Like storyboard artists are like, oh, they're responsible because now my show, I don't like it anymore because that foreign artist did this. Or something like that. It's like there's so many more people behind the scenes than most people realize, like making notes or like approving things.
Yeah, I think that's why it's a little hard to think of like things that we solved, because it's like, yeah, it's such a group effort to solve it. So I'm having trouble thinking of one, because it's like, yeah, it's like you don't. There's nothing like.
You sit in on an animatic and the scene that you hated, you see like someone stepped in and helped out, and it's like, oh, thank God, it works so much better now. Sometimes you just have to let go of your darlings a little bit, and ultimately, it usually turns out much better.
Well, usually, like, I mean, in a feature, you're not, unless, like, the director is like, okay, you know, we're having these huge problems with the story, and we want to get the story crew together to do a brainstorm and talk about it. Unless it's a situation like that, you're not really handed a scene where you're like, can you solve this character? Like, you know, some decisions are made before they want you to try something to tackle it. Like, you're not given, like, sometimes you're given, like, we don't know what this Act 3 is, so, like, go board it. But usually it's not really the case, you know? You're not really handed, like, huge things to figure out, like, in future. I mean, and if, I don't know, maybe I'm wrong, maybe that's happened, but that just seems like a very poorly run production.
Well, sometimes it isn't always like a problem. Like sometimes things work on paper. Like a script, it's just like, you know, everything sounds really cool. There's a lot of smart things. There's a lot of funny, witty things. And they'll get to a paragraph. It's like, and they fight, you know. And sometimes it's just like what works when it's written out. Sometimes it doesn't translate visually. Like I had a sequence where it's just like all this funny, really, really great stuff. And I was just trying to draw it, and I was just like, this just doesn't work. Like, it's like, I don't think I can pack in, like, all of this extra information you're giving me and have it be something the audience could understand. And so I think that's where a lot of that stuff comes from, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Totally. I want to pass it on to Todd. I know he has some questions he's decided to ask you guys. But also, we've been getting just so many questions coming in from the audience, and I want to make sure that I'm respectful of your guys' time. If any of you, you know, can stay on like 5 minutes longer, let us know, and then we can make sure we get in those questions.
Yeah, sure.
Cool. I have a question. I guess I'll direct this one to Maggie, because I know you're huge on character and like character POV. I like boarding action. Like I'm doing a lot of action studies as of right now, but I'm kind of starting to notice that like characters 95% of the time are doing like boring stuff, like sitting and eating and talking and existing. You know, gross. How do you make that stuff interesting?
Wow.
Dutch angles.
Wow.
Throw in a Dutch angle.
I would hope that they're talking and they're not just sitting around doing boring life stuff.
Okay.
Are they? I mean, I don't know.
I mean, just in general, like, there's like, you know, I'm assuming, I look at it as like the connective tissue between like all the cool action stuff. They have to walk into rooms and do things. Like, I don't know. Like, how do you make those mundane character moments, I guess, interesting?
I mean, if you're ever given something like that, like I just recently did a workshop on like a 2-character dialogue scene, because I think for me, like in my opinion, like you know exactly how somebody's boarding skill, what level somebody is at in storyboarding, if they're able to give you a really solid, entertaining 2-person dialogue scene, because it's really just 2 people talking, right? And you could literally board it in a way, like you could board it using like 4 shots, and it'll make sense. It's just boring. It's just talking heads. So, you know, the challenge with things like that is to find, you know, if they're sitting, like, how are they sitting? What is the pose that they're sitting in? Like, you can get so much storytelling just from a pose or an expression. if they're eating a sandwich, like, how are they eating the sandwich? Are they eating like all of the ingredients inside first before they eat the bread? Like, whatever this character does should tell you what kind of person they are or what kind of character they are. And if it doesn't, then you should really look into that. Like George Miller, there was like an article interview he did about the Mad Max movie, and he said he had a backstory for everything in his movie, even like a can that was that's in the desert. He's like he knew how the can got there, like an empty little tin can, and he had this like crazy backstory for like the blind guy, like rocking out of the guitar at the head of the strapped onto the bus thing.
Right.
And so everything comes from character, and like how a character behaves should just be reflected in any sort of mundane activity that they do. So that's what I would do.
No, that 100% makes sense. Okay. Tony, I have a question for you. So, looking at like the things that you've worked on, like the Rio, Inside Out, things with like not humans, but they're also carrying the story. How do you kind of find the humanity in like characters that like aren't actual people? What challenges come with that?
That's a good question. It's when we're reading the script, I think that I don't actually see the animal so much. I'm just seeing the character, especially if they're talking. It's not so hard. I guess. I kind of like. I'll draw the characters. I'll find out who the voice is. If we don't know who the voice is yet, I'll kind of attach my own voice to it, especially because the director typically has like an idea of who that character is going to be voiced by, or at least gives like a brief background on what this character is all about. And it's always based in human characters, so it's like I said, you're always kind of attaching a voice to those things, and you don't really differentiate between a human or a bird. If that makes sense.
No, it totally makes sense.
Especially when you start hearing like in Rio, it was Jesse Eisenberg, and as soon as we started hearing recordings, it was like, okay, and I mean, also you watch the films, and especially when you're on a film earlier on, you when the directors talking about who they want to voice the character, we'll immediately start like looking up all their films and listening to the kind of people, the kind of tone that they have and characteristic, and why it is that they're looking for that character, and you kind of like build this thing inside your head of like who they are. And like I said, it's always it's always based in a human character. So I'm just attaching it to this animal, and that's it. Does that answer the question?
Oh yeah, it totally does. Okay, I have a question. I guess all you guys can answer it too. Boarding musical scenes is a foreign concept to me. What are you guys' approaches to that kind of thing? What kind of challenges come with that?
Has anybody done that?
I have.
Yeah, there you
go. I've somehow become the musical person. I guess, because I like songs. I like musicals. God, I'm not sure where that sort of sensibility comes from. Maybe it comes from years of watching AMVs on YouTube or something like that. Do you like waffles? It's what saved my career. No. Actually, I find almost that doing musical stuff is a bit easier for me than things like just people talking. Because, you eventually find a way. It's just like focusing on emotion when people talk, and there are interesting or different ways to like make the camera look more interesting. But with a musical, there is a rhythm to it. there are beats in the song that you can rely on. Yeah, exactly. Sometimes you have to write the song, and that might be even harder. I've had to do that several times as well. And it really, the beats of the music, the lyrics and stuff, it's like, when you close your eyes and you're listening to a song and you like imagine a music video in your head.
As you do.
That's where yeah, as you do. And it's like, there it is. Those are the skills that you need. And like, those are the most fun because you get to do like the craziest sort of shots. Like you get to, like, for slice of life sort of shows or for like comedy, it's very basic, the sort of camera shots that you use. It's like, you don't do all these extreme sort of things. I joked about Dutch angles and stuff, but you just really should be sparing on that. But now, like for musicals, I know you get a bit more freedom in 3D, but like even in 2D, you get to do these like way more theatrical things. It's like you can be so wide. It's like the environment is the character, and the person on screen singing, it's like it's small, and that could be significant. Like maybe they're feeling small, and maybe it's just like they're angry about something, and so they start running, or everything. It's like the colors change to fit the mood. Like that's like my favorite part because it's like this is your raw emotion when you draw it. Like this is like how you necessarily. I mean, it's how you feel inside. And that's a very, very, again, non-scientific way of describing it because you really do have to tap into pure feelings to make these sort of things work. And maybe I'm overselling it a little bit. Sometimes you're just doing...
You're all the words.
Well, I mean, like, sometimes you get, like, okay, this song is, like, 2 seconds long. And it's just, like, you just have to draw a character dancing around for, like, a little bit because it's, like, a joke. But even that can be fun,
No, totally. Thank you for the in-depth question. I really appreciate it. We have Stephanie Stein, I hope I pronounced your last name right, asked to come up and is going to give some 2 cents on a previous question I asked.
Stephanie is a badass. She's directing DreamWorks. No, and just a quick plug, she's going to be in a Lightbox Expo talk this coming Sunday with me, Sunday morning at 9 a.m. with Megan Nicole Dong and Jennifer Young Nelson that you all need to be a part of. Maggie, I'm going to hit you up on something like this too, but I'll talk to you about that separately, all right?
Okay.
Hey, thanks for having me on really last minute, but I thought that was such an interesting question about like, action boards being super entertaining and everything else being kind of boring to board or to watch. And for me, like, I am totally with you. Like, I started out in my career thinking like action is the shit. Like, that's what I want to do. But the more time that's passed, like over the years, I've been realizing that the actual stuff that is memorable to me and that actually give me like lingering emotions and stuff that I can still feel like angry or happy or like just the whole rainbow of emotions, right? It doesn't actually stem from any action scenes. Or if it does, it's because those action scenes are a result of the tension and conflict that happen between characters. And that usually happens in more mundane things, like people just sitting and talking. I'm just going to, pull up like a recent experience for me that really, really hurt me, actually. But I mean, honestly, like I sort of had a fight with someone, and I was just sitting at my desk and like looking into the camera on my laptop. But honestly, like this was the most conflict in my life in many, many years. And I was like, this is giving me as much adrenaline as any action scene that I've ever seen, right? Because the thing is, like, I have my own wants and needs, right? But then the person on the other end has the same, like, sort of wants and needs. And that's where the entertainment lies, is when you bring those two separate and totally different and very conflicting needs up against each other. So people can either be fighting like action style, or they can be fighting verbally. either way is going to be interesting to me. But honestly, like if I were to give a vote, my favorite scenes are when people are just like doing other shit besides fighting, like martial arts style. So there's definitely ways to make that kind of stuff interesting. It's just like Maggie said, you have to get into character, but getting into character also means like you have to understand both characters, that are fighting. And if you can understand both sides, like both points of views, you can get into their heads, you can storyboard from their POV, from the point of view, and that is where the gold really is. And that's just that's all I wanted to say. Thank you for letting me jump on.
Dang, that was a great answer. Say more words, please.
No, I'm out. Thank you.
Okay, fair enough. Okay. We're kind of inching towards like the 1:30 mark. So if any of you guys need to pop off around like 1:30, it's totally fine. If you guys want to stay, also great. We have like a few questions and a couple of audience questions. Yeah, I just wanted to throw that out there. Maggie and Jony, if you guys are still here with us, since you guys have experience in like the whole heads of story role, when you guys started like doing that for the first time, what things kind of really went well and what things kind of didn't, and kind of how did you guys handle those ups and downs with that kind of role? Yeah.
Yeah, for me, what was important is like, when you're working as a story artist, and you wish there are certain things that have been done in a certain way that will help you as a story artist. So I just kind of like having that in mind. So when I became a head of story, I try to accommodate my story artists the best I can, in a way that giving them all the information that I know, having an open communication with them, and also being a mentor. I think that's important too. There's a lot of like young story artists coming up. I at least in my time, I didn't quite get a lot of help at times, mentorship. So I try to kind of provide that for my younger artists, and then sort of being a cheerleader, really. I don't know how Maggie did it, but being behind them is sort of kind of like make them believe in themselves, and then work through problems with them. Yeah, just being there for them, I think, is important.
Yeah, there's you are a leader. You're leading a team, and it can get really hard, especially when you're preparing for screenings and stuff. So it's keeping the it gets really hard for directors to directly communicate with the story crew. So it's your job to make that connection between the story, keep them in the loop as best as you can, because story can be constantly changing. So keeping them updated. I think mentorship is a huge one. I've personally just learned so much from all the heads of story that I have worked with, and so I've also, and I think that experience of being an artist on shows, and a lot of different shows, and working with a lot of different people was really helpful, because there are heads of stories that I absolutely loved, and other ones that I was like, oh well, I wish they did this more. And so I would just collect those thoughts, and then when it came for me to do the job, I knew I was like, okay, this is what I feel like is a good head of story, and so I try to provide that for my crew.
Yeah, and also sometimes it could be tricky, right? Sometimes you do have artists that kind of believe in what they're doing and are adamant, even though it's okay to disagree, and you kind of want to let them explore and do what they believe in, and that's part of it. And to protect them and have a communication with directors like, hey, so and so have this vision and they want to try it. Just a heads up, I do see something in it, but not quite what you guys looking for. But have an open mind.
It's
take
also
a look
just dealing with a lot of different personalities.
Right. Yes.
That just comes with any sort of management position. Yeah. And really recognizing where everybody's strengths are and where what everybody's comfort level is, and casting people appropriately, for scenes, and Yeah, just trying to, and also do your job at the same time, as well as like being a leader.
Yeah.
It's really probably like for me, I think it was. I mean, I'm not really into the directing yet, like 100%, but it was head of story is a very, very tough job. You're kind of a director a little bit, but not.
Yeah, you don't have the final call.
Yeah, but then you're also a story artist, so you have to do that work as well. So like, which is already hard. So you're actually doing two jobs at once.
Yeah.
And a lot of times, like I've had to redo other artists' work because it wasn't up to par. Where the director's like, well, we really want you to do it because like.
Right.
So you take on a lot more work.
Yeah, especially towards screening.
Yeah.
That's where you do the most work because you're going to be sitting in editorial and going through sequences with the director, and screening is coming up in a week or 3 days, and you basically just have to fix a lot of stuff on the spot,
Yeah, but I can't imagine being a director without having done that job because it's such great training.
Mm-hmm.
Going from a story artist to director, like I don't know how you would do that because you don't really get to spend any time in editorial like if you're a board artist on a feature.
Right.
So that and also not being in the rooms with all the executives and knowing how to navigate those political waters is a huge part of feature. And if you don't have that experience, I don't know how anybody would do it.
Right.
I'm sure people do, but I think for me, it would be super challenging.
But the other thing too, you are somewhat responsible for the development of your artists, right?
Mm-hmm.
Other than casting them, the sequences they're good at, you do also want, at least when I was doing it, I try to kind of mix it up a little bit because I know sometimes like artists good with action, I want to give them some emotional scenes so that they can grow, so they don't get pigeonholed in certain sequences. So then I have to convince the directors because they would go against their instinct, right? Like, I was like,
and then if it doesn't work out, then it's on you.
That's on me, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. That's on us as a head of story. Then I would totally take on that blame and say, listen, like I want to try this, and I explain to the directors like this is the reasoning.
Yeah.
If it's successful, then you have a stronger team in the studio. So.
Yeah, lots of things to juggle.
Yeah, for sure.
Awesome. Thank you guys for so much wisdom in the room. No, really though, because like I'm just taking rapid notes with one hand and a microphone the other one. Jed, I have a question for you. So I know you have a background in game design, and I know like you have a bit of a crossover between like the two disciplines. What's the kind of relationship you have now with both game design and storyboarding, and how like one influences the other? I want to hear your thoughts on that. Yes.
Oh, that's a good question. If you find out, let me know.
Fair enough. Next question.
I think, yeah, that's something I'm constantly thinking about. I think one of I don't know, the short answer I'd get be in both, if you look at it in terms of like linear storytelling or dynamic storytelling, narrative, whether it branches off or stays on rails. Anything you're doing, and the one thing I've noticed that they share that always comes into play, and this doesn't even have to be a narrative game. This is anything that you play. It all comes down to like meaningful choices that you make, and I think that's true when you're thinking about character point of view. Like you're always trying to think not what would anyone do, what would this specific character do? And that's what makes it a meaningful choice, like meaningful to what I'm experiencing. And I think that's similar, what you make, if it's designed well, it's fun to play because those choices you make, you feel like you have agency, and those are meaningful choices that you're engaging in. And I think that for me tends to be like where a big place where they always kind of cross over.
Awesome. Okay. I'm going to ask one more question and then kick it back to Anika. Maggie, this is for you. I was looking at IMDb's, all of you guys', yeah, you know, here we go. I was like, dang, I watched that movie when I was 6.
Oh no! Stop.
So my question is, like, what is any advice for like that workflow of going from project to project to project? Because I'm looking at like your work career linearly. It's like 2007, 2008, 2012. Like, you ain't had a day off. Like, I'm trying to be like you. How, Maggie? How?
Oh my gosh. Okay, now that you've made me super old.
No. No.
Although, to be fair, I don't know about Ariel, but like, I'm younger than all these boys, okay? Just for the record.
Well,
Of course.
we don't know.
Oh, I
Who's
do.
the baby?
Did you just call?
Well,
Did you call me old?
I mean, older than me.
You're old.
Older than me. I mean, I'm younger than the three of you. I'm sure about that.
It's a mistake of a question. I apologize.
Okay. Anyway.
What the fuck?
You know, like when I first started my career, I was working at DreamWorks. It was okay. So you know, everybody knows how old I am because IMDb me. But you know, the year I started, it was like Shrek 2 had just come out. It was like the heyday of DreamWorks. It was like, you know, Jed knows, we had crazy IPO parties. We get drunk at the studio. It was like insane. We would like steal bottles of wine like from the you know the table and just drink it in our office and stuff. It was like crazy, and it was really fun. And so, you know, that's why I kept working, because it was so fun. And you know, I couldn't believe that I was doing this job. Like, I was in meetings talking about story and characters and making cartoons while, like, you know, with like the most talented people in the world to do this job. So it was just a lot of fun. And so I worked really hard, but I did hit a lot of hard times where like I was like this close to getting fired, like, and saved myself. So I worked really hard, but I also partied really hard. And I tell a lot of like young artists, you know, they ask me like, how do you balance this? And you're like, you just do. You have to really just treat it as a job that you enjoy. You know, we're lucky that something that was our talent and like our hobby became something that pays the bills. But at the end of the day, it's a job. You know, it's a job that's creatively satisfying. And that's kind of the way I've seen it from the beginning. So I've always wanted to just maintain a job so that I can maintain my party lifestyle. Like, that's kind of the way I see it. Even now, I'm like, oh man, I just have to like work and then I could get this vacation, you know, like that's kind of the way I try to balance everything out. And so, yeah, like, I don't know. I love this job. I think it's fun, but like, I'm not going to like kill myself for it because it's just not worth it. You know, and I think with any young artist, like, yes, work hard, like, and you need to, especially when you're young, because when you're old like us, like, it's going to be harder to work hard because we're tired. And so you just put in the work, but also work smart. Don't, you know, if something doesn't work out, just keep at it. If it doesn't work, then just think like, okay, maybe I need to change my tactic here, you know. And don't try to learn everything at once. Like it took me probably 5 to 7 years before I felt really comfortable being a board artist and being like, yeah, like I can do this. I can take on any scene. Mm-hmm. And I see a lot of artists just try to do everything at once and try to like find a shortcut. Like, how do I do this fast? It's like, there's no way, dude. Like there's no way to do it fast. Like some people do, and don't look at those people as examples because they're bad examples.
I keep looking at those people and get sad.
Yeah, it is hard. And I think it's, you know, in the age of like social media and stuff, a lot of things are very deceiving, you know. We go to social media a lot to hire people. And too many cases we've brought in people thinking like, wow, their work is so great. But then, you know, they're posting work that took them like 2 weeks to do one drawing, you know.
I see.
And within the timeline of a scene, which is like, okay, turnaround is like thumbnails or whatever, first pass is a week, they're not able to execute. So there's also that too. So like you as a junior artist learning shouldn't really look at things and think like, oh my God, this person did this in like so little, they could be posting things that they've worked 2-3 weeks on.
Mm-hmm.
So there's like context to everything.
Mm-hmm. I've got a last question to wrap us up. And this one is for the boys who are older than Maggie. Jed, Tony, I know Jony, you have to hop out. And so don't feel like you have to stay for this one. But Jed and Tony, I'm curious, like in your experience, like working in the industry for so many years, like how have you seen your role, or like how have you seen it, like storyboarding change over your career? And can you tell us a little bit about how?
Tony?
Yeah, sure. Well, digital was the biggest change for me because just going from paper to pen and pencil, and I don't remember what movie we stopped doing that, but it was actually Jony and I bought our own laptops so we could draw digitally. And it was just so much easier because we would take, when we were drawing on paper, we would take it and get it scanned, and then we'd have to like take it into Photoshop and like, so we could do camera moves and stuff like this. And
You didn't like move the character on the Xerox and then re-photocopy?
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
But other stuff, I don't know. There were, but that was the biggest change because pitching too, like pitching digitally was a huge change because it's going from looking at something on a board and having the director looking ahead at what you're pitching. There are pluses and minuses to both, but to me, the pros outweighed the cons of going to a digital boarding and pitching, and I feel like that to me was the biggest shift that I felt. Otherwise, it's all the same. We could still do it on paper. That's what's funny is we don't need to do it digitally. We could still do it on paper. It works. I don't know. Jed?
Yeah, I think that's similar. I mean, that's obviously the biggest one was going paper to digital, but I don't miss the paper cuts. But
or the pin stabs when you're
I do miss the pins. I love pins. That was one of the first things Rob Gibbs taught us was how to throw pins at the wall and make them stick.
Yeah, that was a gift. That was a talent.
But yeah, I think like the biggest change. I mean, beyond that, like I think the biggest shift for me, like it feels like it's gone from like we don't pitch in front of boards. You don't have to pitch in front of a room anymore. It's very like you're just looking at the panels on a screen and clicking through, which on one hand is nice because it's no one's looking ahead of the scene and you can get a sense of how it's going to actually cut an editorial. I think that's a really big improvement. On the flip side, though, there's something about pitching. And I was just hearing someone else talk about this recently too, like and how it's like we've lost kind of this. I don't know, this impetus to like make sure like how you sell your scene or how you approach it or making. I don't know. Some of that kind of got lost, and it's like there's almost too much focus on the drawing side of it more than like, the crafting of a scene. I think that's the biggest change I've seen.
So interesting. Yeah. All right. I know I said that was the last question, but we have an audience question from Devin from YouTube. So this is really the last question. So this is open to anyone. Do you start from when you're approaching a scene? Do you approach it from within a character first, more personal and intimate, or versus the big idea first and work your way in?
I think it always has to start character first, personally.
But usually the two are the same. It's right. I mean.
I think so. Yeah. I mean, like the big idea comes from whatever they're feeling and things like.
Yeah, like the way the character like reacts to something is part of the story. Like that's what makes it. Yeah. Like. Yeah. Usually, yeah, most boards tend to, like for me at least, they really have to be character driven because it's like that's more fun. It's like there's the archetypes of the characters, like, oh, this is the troublemaker, or this is the nice one, or this is the sad one, you know? And it's like the way they react is what propels like the story or the conflict. So like if you like you can just like even as an exercise you could like take a character and like ask them a question and like see how they would answer that or react to a situation. Like that's a huge part of storyboarding. It's figuring those character traits out.
I just want to jump on that and completely agree with Maggie that they are one and the same. They are completely intertwined. You cannot separate character from theme, because what the character's journey is basically addressing the theme, and it's shown by like what is this character's flaw, and how do they overcome it. What is the question at the beginning of of the movie or the show, and then what is the answer that they come to at the end. So it's intricately tied together, and you have to think about both. You can't. It's actually really impossible to separate it, and if you do, you're probably going to be missing the mark for both anyway.
Yep.
Amazing. Well, that's a great place to end. Maureen, I'll hand it back to you to wrap up today.
Okay, thank you everyone. Thanks Ariel, Tony, Jed, Maggie, and Stephanie now too, and also Jony who left, for giving us your lunch hour. Really appreciate it. And we have so many other questions that came in, but unfortunately we don't have enough time to go through all of them. But thank you again. And you guys can pop off now if you have to head out. Thank you so much.
Sure.
Thanks everyone.
Thanks.
Bye.
For the rest of you in the room, on Wednesday, September 22nd, please join us for the Latinx animation takeover. We have the heads of Latinx community coming on, as well as the Trolls World Tour production coordinator Brian Dimas and others coming on in celebration of this month. Please follow us Please follow us on Twitter and Instagram at Animation In Club to access our future talks. And you can catch us every other week on YouTube at Baobab Studios or on the Lightbox Expo Discord and also here on Clubhouse. Thank you, everyone.